Hello there and welcome back to another video here on Wristwatch Revival. My name is Marshall. Thank you so much for coming along. This time on the bench, we have this awesome Omega Seamaster Cosmic 2000 from the early 1970s. Though I have to say this one has a bit of a tragic story to it. As you can see, it's in fairly rough shape. The bracelet's are actually broken. And on the back, you can see an inscription here, JGR Christmas 1974. Now, a lot of times when I get a watch on my bench, I won't know whose initials it is, where it came from. But in this case, I actually do know. And that's because a patron of mine contacted me about fixing his uncle's watch. And that's this watch right here. His uncle was named John Gerard Rasmussen, and he unfortunately passed away in the late 1970s. He was in the Merchant Marines, and he was involved in a plane crash in Nova Scotia. And this watch was the only item that was recovered and given to the grandparents of Adam who contacted me. You can see the watch is pretty banged up. It's missing a bezel insert here. The crystal's all scratched up as well. But and as you can tell, the bracelet has seen better days as well. It just comes off in my hands here. What is up with that? Oh, I see. The spring bar broke. Wow, this is interesting. These very rarely break. This watch probably took quite an impact, and yeah, it actually broke the spring bar inside. I can actually show you what a spring bar looks like if I can just... There we go. Well, no, that's actually still not all of it. So there's the spring and then the two ends, but there should be a metal tube that houses that spring. It must just be stuck in the end link. Yeah, it is. I can see it. So we'll just push it out. And there it is. Okay, so that's what a spring bar looks like when it's not broken. There's a metal spring in the middle and then two end links on the side that can kind of push out and keep your bracelet in place. These are actually very, very resilient. So this one really did get beat up, I assume, in the plane crash. At any rate, this watch ended up in the hands of John's father, the person who owned this watch's father. So the grandfather of the person who contacted me. Yeah, look at that. That's actually bent. Oh, wow. Yeah, this thing took an absolute beating. I wonder if the other end link is bent as well. It is. Can you see how twisted and bent that is? Yeah, so we're going to have to fix that at some point here as well. And taking a look at the watch once again. Well, it does run. Adam told me that when he messaged me. He said that even though it's seen better days as far as the case goes, it does run, so that's good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this thing apart and get it restored and get it back into the hands, actually, interestingly, of Adam's mom. This is a family heirloom at this point that started off with Adam's grandfather, the father of the original owner. And then it kind of got passed around down to Adam's mom, and then Adam's mom gave it to him, but he thought it would be really cool if we got it running well and fixed up, and he could give it to her as a gift to help remember her brother, who was the one who passed away. So a really important watch here for this family. John was the only son of the family, and they were understandably devastated when he passed away tragically in that plane crash. So we've got a lot riding on the bench this time. This one isn't just fun and games. We really want to try to do a good job with this and get it back into working order. As you can see, this thing is dirty. In fact, it may be even more than dirt. That might be like a gasket or the remnants of a gasket or something. So I've taken the bezel off, but I still can't figure out how to actually open this watch up. Whoa. Okay, well, I guess maybe that's how I do it. The outer case, it looks like, just comes free without... Oh boy, okay, I see. There's more... Yeah, you can see that there was some type of a gasket holding that in. In fact, it looks like there's still a little bit there, but it's melted / disintegrated. This isn't uncommon, these rubber gaskets, over a long period of time, especially if they're not replaced or lubricated. They can completely disintegrate like this and almost become kind of like a tar-like substance. It's very sticky and very difficult to deal with. Although now that I have removed that outer case, I still don't know how to take the case back off of this thing. Maybe it comes apart here where this gasket was. So I'm going to try to clean out at least the big chunks of this gasket with a piece of pegwood. Yikes. You can see just how bad of a shape that gasket actually got when we replaced that. And we'll do it with a full one, but I still cannot take this thing apart. Oh, well, speaking of taking it apart, there goes the crown and stem. It just pulls out. That shouldn't happen. I just can't see. This doesn't look like it. It certainly isn't a screw back case, and it's also not one that you would snap off. Maybe it's something that I need to like press through. I'm going to try gently using my press here to see if I can get any movement out of this case back. Oh yeah, that is actually working. Okay, so this is the strangest watch case I think I've ever seen. Oh, it came off though. Or at least some part of it did. What is going on here? Okay, so there's another part, and then that left the crystal still inside my press tool? So there's like a sandwich of different parts here. Let's just take a look at what we ended up with. So on the bottom, that's the case back. And then I can take the crystal off, and then I guess it just leaves the movement kind of sandwiched in between. It looks like, oh, I see. Yeah, so there's a retaining ring, but also there's this kind of gasket thing, that red part there that you see that holds that all together. And then it looks like there's one on the bottom of the case back as well. And, oh yeah, it looks like it just comes off. Okay, well, I'm going to hang on to those because my guess is that those are not going to be something that I can find easily. Well, that leaves us with the movement. And like I said, it is running, so that's nice to see. And the dial looks like it's in really good shape. So I'll start by removing the hands. Hands are very delicate, of course, and so it's good to remove them about as early in the process as you can. And I use a plastic membrane box. This actually has a suspended piece of plastic in between there, so it kind of squishes the hands in so they can't move around. I just like that so they're not just flopping around in a box or whatever. As you can see, this is an automatic movement from Omega. It looks actually fairly complicated as well. There's a plastic movement ring holder here. This movement ring just makes sure that the movement fits up against the walls of the case. So now we need to take the dial off. And as you can see, it's held on by a screw. There's actually two of them. But now I can just take the dial safely off. And again, dial is in beautiful shape. So I'm going to carefully put that in another specialized little box. That's just called a dial box. And it kind of suspends the dial as well. As you can see, this watch has a calendar function. And we'll start by removing this large plate that covers up the calendar works and the motion works, which is underneath. The motion works and the calendar works are exactly what you think. They're the part of the watch that are responsible for moving the calendar over and moving the hands of the watch as well. Usually when we look at this side of the watch as a watchmaker, we would refer to this as the dial side. I think you know why. You can see the parts I'm removing here are actually parts of the calendar work. So these are the parts that will make the calendar tick over at midnight to get that next day up. And also, though, they let you set the date via a quick set mechanism. So you don't have to wind the watch over and over and over to get it to slowly go one day at a time. You can just set the date to whatever you want. I'm going to use a dial holder just to hold on to that too. And before we dive in, let's take a look on the time grapher and see how it's doing. That's kind of a weird reading. As you can see, it's missing 15 seconds a day, and it had a kind of an unusually high amplitude. Actually, that looked a little too high. But hey, at least it's running. So that, outside of a service, I'm hoping that we don't have to do anything crazy with that. I can't really figure out how to let down the mainspring on the watch. So I'm just going to start by removing the balance here. It's fairly safe to do this at this juncture, as the only pressure on it comes via the pallet. And now I can remove the automatic winding works. This is an automatic watch. As you can see, there's that big half circle rotor that's sitting on top of the watch. And that's what actually swivels around, and every little movement of that is translated into a partial wind. Same thing as if you took your watch and just wound it a little tiny bit with your fingers. It does that every single time that rotor spins around. And it turns out human beings, when they wear watches, they move their hands a lot. And you can capture some of the energy of your moved arm and hand and wrist via that rotor, and it'll wind your watch for you. It's really ingenious. Okay. So now I can take off the train wheel bridge. This is the part of the watch that I think most people think of when they think of what's inside of a watch. Most people call these parts, you'll see right here, there you go, gears. They're not. They're actually called wheels in watchmaking, not gears. But whatever, call them what you want. This one doesn't want to come out. I'm not really sure why. There's this plastic part there that looks like it might be a hack mechanism. This is the escape wheel, but I just have to kind of coax it out from underneath this wheel here that doesn't want to come out. What is on the other side of this? Oh. Okay. Well, it looks like it's friction fit on the other side. So I'm going to just wait on that for now. I will have to take that apart because friction fit parts just means that they're pressed together. They usually need to be lubricated or cleaned at least in between. So I'll need to sort that out. But for now, I'm just going to continue with the disassembly. This part of the movement is called the barrel bridge. And that's because that big circle underneath that silver part that you can see now is the mainspring barrel. And that bridge is the thing that holds it in place. And there it is. The mainspring's housed inside of that. We'll take that out in a little bit. Okay. And that means now I can take off the pallet fork bridge and the pallet fork. And besides that pesky wheel that's still stuck there, the rest of it's basically taken apart. So for a fairly complicated watch, I guess that came apart okay. I've never worked on this movement before. That's something that I say a lot because the way I approach things for the channel is, I want to find interesting, cool watches to show you. And that means not doing the exact same model and the exact same company and everything every single time. I've repeated a few. I don't mind doing it. But, a lot of watchmakers will specialize in a certain brand. And then they'll, you can build up a stockpile of parts and expertise about each of the movements. It is advantageous to do it. But since this is a hobby for me and I'm doing it because I love it and I find it interesting, I like to mix it up. Plus, I'm making videos here too. I think about you and I don't want to show you the same stuff every time. It does make my life a little more difficult though, because I have to figure these things out every single time. Whoa, geez, that thing just jumped away. But that's because I haven't taken apart the keyless works yet. That's this side here. Keyless works is where the crown and the stem engage with the watch. In this case, it actually has 3 different positions. There's a winding position, there is a hand setting position, and there is a quick set for the date on this particular movement. That's a feature. Not all watches have that. I mean, not all watches have a date feature at all, but this one has date with quick set. You can see my hands got pretty dirty here from all that gasket buildup that I scraped away from the case. I'm hoping that the case will clean up nicely. But like I said, those melted gaskets they're a bear. They really are. Those things are messy. Okay, got to be careful here for this spring. This is called the yoke spring. And as I've said before on the channel, I picture a yoke spring with a Born to Fly tattoo, because those suckers will go. That's why I use that black stick to kind of make sure that they stay in place. There's the yoke as well. And that's the setting lever coming out as well. So with that, we've got basically all of it disassembled. The only thing I haven't yet is that wheel, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and put the movement through the watch cleaning machine with it intact, and then I'll sort it out after. I can always manually clean anything that I need to. Right now, I'm just putting back on the balance. It'll go through the watch cleaning machine with the balance in situ. That way it protects it. So I'm not quite done disassembling though, because I haven't actually taken apart this automatic winding works just yet. I'll start by taking off the rotor itself. Omega did a very good job designing this part of it, because you can quite easily replace the rotor or even a part of the rotor if it wears, and it can be a wear part, no doubt about it. Whoop. Okay. Now, you can see, though, there's still more to go here on the automatic winding works as well. So I'll just take this apart. Again, this is a similar process that I use for the movement itself, right? I want to take everything apart. And the main reason for that is that there's primarily 2 or maybe 3 things that happen, and they really can't happen unless you completely disassemble like this. One of them, of course, is cleaning. Another one is inspection. It's just hard to see stuff if it's still together. You just can't see the teeth on each of the wheels and things like that, right? And then the other thing, of course, is lubrication. And having it completely disassembled allows you to put the lubrication where it's supposed to go. Okay, so there's the automatic winding works disassembled as well. So that'll just go into the same containers with everything else into the watch cleaning machine. Fairly complicated movement here, as I mentioned, because now, look at this. There's more to take apart here on top of the barrel bridge. I've got 3 more wheels, and they all look similar, but not quite the same. And then this one has like a washer thing on it. You can see it's 2 separate parts. So yeah, I haven't quite seen that before, but again, it all needs to come apart so that we can thoroughly clean it. And of course, let's not forget about the barrel that I mentioned before. Again, this houses the mainspring for the watch, and that's it right there, wound in. That is where all of the power for your watch comes from. It's interesting, you think, well, I wind that up and then it powers the watch, and that is true. But what's really happening is you wind that up and then the watch allows that to unwind at a very specific rate. That's what's actually happening. That's what the watch is actually designed to do, which is weird because I think most people think of it kind of the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to set all the watch parts into the tray here for safekeeping. I've got another project in the watch cleaning machine, but I'll be able to put it in there in just a little bit here, and we can get everything just cleaned up as nicely as we possibly can. Though, take a look at this. I noticed here, do you see this rust? Ooh, yeah, that does not look particularly good. I'm going to run it through the watch cleaning machine, but we may need to address that as well. And when it comes to the bracelet and the case, you can see there's a bunch of grime in between the links there, and this is going to need to be cleaned up as well. So first, though, let's get everything clean, and we'll start with the watch cleaning machine. So this is an antique one that I bought, but it still works very well. It's an L&R Mastermatic. And it puts it through 3 different processes. This first one is just the cleaning solution, and then it goes through 2 rinses as well. And while the movement gets cleaned up, I did want to say thank you to everybody on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/wristwatchrevival. If you're interested in supporting what I do here on the channel, I really do appreciate each and every one of you who support me. And yes, you get a Wristwatch Revival sticker in the mail as well. Any level that you sign up for, you get a thank you card and a sticker from me, just as my way of saying thanks for supporting me, as I really, really appreciate it. It does mean the world to me. And you can throw that sticker on your water bottle or a laptop or your car, or, throw it in a drawer or whatever you want with it. It's your sticker. So here's the ultrasonic cleaner as well. Now, the ultrasonic cleaner can be used in conjunction, by the way, with the watch cleaning machine. In fact, some watch cleaning machines even have ultrasonic cleaners built in. Now, mine's old and doesn't have that kind of functionality, but there are many of them that do. If I feel that I need to put the parts through, I can do that in the ultrasonic here as well. For this, though, I'm doing the bracelet and all of the parts of the case, which, as you can see, is a little bit ridiculous. There's the main part of the case, there's this inner ring, there's the outer part, there's the two gaskets, there's this movement ring, there's the bezel, there's the case back, and of course the bracelet as well. It's a lot. This is a very strangely designed watch. And look at that. Those are all the parts for it. And this is what it looks like, though, out of the cleaning machine, looking much, much better, and in a position now where we can start to tackle this thing head on. Now, one thing that we didn't do, though, is take apart that friction fit wheel that I mentioned before. Now, I give it a little pull, but it's just, I don't want to bend the pivot that's attached to. So I'm going to use a tool called a Presto tool to try to remove this gear, because I don't want to force it with the tweezers and break or bend something. But this tool is actually designed to go around the spokes of a wheel like this, and then it pushes up from the bottom, and voila. I think it just detached. Yeah, so this comes out now. You can see that pivot goes all the way through, and then the other part right there just fell to the bench. So I can clean these parts individually and make sure that they're good to go, and then I can reassemble them when I reassemble the movement. Speaking of reassembling the movement, it is that time. So let's start things off by reassembling the mainspring barrel that we looked at before. The first thing I'm going to do is use a little bit of braking grease. So this goes along the inside edge of the outer part of the barrel, and that's where the spring will actually rub up against. And what it does is it gives it, well, a little bit of lubrication, but also a way to sort of slow down. Because have you ever thought of an automatic watch? When you wind up a normal watch, when you get to the end of the spring, it stops. You can't wind it anymore. But automatic watches don't have an end. You can wind them forever. And you got to wonder, well, if I'm wearing my watch all day and it's winding my watch all day, what happens when it gets full, right? When it's at a full wind? And what happens is that spring can gently slide along the edge of that barrel. And that's why we have to put that lubricant there, or else it can create metal shavings or perform worse. Oh, this is my favorite. Oh, I love that. That's my favorite sound in watchmaking, or feeling. There's a bunch of those, but using the mainspring winders and then that satisfying click is definitely short on my list of favorites. So now I can put a little bit of lubrication on where the lid of this barrel is going to meet up with the arbor. That's that middle part that I already put in. And then I can use this little tool to secure the lid like so. So there we go. So now the mainspring barrel is lubricated and ready to go. Before I put on the wheels, though, I do want to clean up this part. It went through the cleaning machine, so I'm not super worried about it, but this is that part that I had to take apart using that Presto tool just a few minutes ago. But now that I've got it cleaned up with some Rodico, we can begin reassembly. We'll start off with the mainspring barrel and the mainspring barrel bridge going on top. That fits nicely. You can see I can still spin the barrel as well, so it's not too tight. And then we can tighten that down. Sometimes people ask, how tight are you supposed to lock things down with the screwdrivers? And the answer is, it's feel. They actually technically do make torque wrenches or torque screwdrivers that can measure how tight you've actually made it, but I've never seen anybody actually use one in watchmaking. Again, the tools do exist, but they're just not a thing. You get a real feel for it. And if you've ever worked on cars or anything like that, you'll have a sense for how tight it's supposed to go. And then you just need to know which screws are supposed to be pretty darn tight versus the ones that you really don't want to tighten down too much. Okay, so I can put the wheels into place here, but I am going to need to reapply that little end on the other side. But I'm going to do that after I get the train wheel bridge back on so that the wheels are all steady and in place. And let's not forget this little hack thing. A little surprised to see the use of plastics in a few parts of the watch, but they must just be in low friction areas. Perhaps more economical, though. Omega is a, big brand. These watches are not cheap. I'm a little surprised to see it. Okay, let's see if we can get this train wheel bridge aligned properly. Ooh, I think we might have gotten lucky here. Yeah, it looks like it. So that's really nice. Sometimes that can be a prolonged exercise where you have to line up all those pivots without pushing down too hard and not screwing down so that you break them. But we got lucky this time. I'll take it. So this is the other side of this little friction fit part. So I'm just going to press fit it on with my tweezers gently. Yeah, just like that. So that's good to go. And that means that we can turn our attention to the keyless works now. And a little bit of lubrication as well where the yoke will meet. And this is the clutch and the sliding clutch going into place. As well as the setting lever. Again, just making sure to use the right lubrication. The blue lubrication that I use is a grease. It's kind of a heavy duty grease, at least by watchmaking standards. Now we can put this yoke back in. Oh, but remember, look how rusty that thing is. I'm actually a little bit concerned that that rust may continue to develop on the part. So I'm going to try to restore it a little bit by sanding down the rust and making sure that it doesn't have any active rust going on. That's a little bit better, but you can still see some of that staining, and I do want it to look nice. So we'll keep working this on the sandpaper here. It's getting better, but it's still not quite where I want. I think I need to get in there a little bit more with this flat sanding stick. So I'm going to kind of put some work in on this thing. It is funny. There we go. That looks much better. You can see there's a little bit of pitting on it, but I don't want to take too much material off, but that looks way, way better. So now we can actually put this part back into the watch. Funny enough, this is of course a part that nobody's ever going to see, but when you do workmanship like this, you want to do the best job you can, regardless of whether somebody's going to see it or not. All right. Now the spring actually needs to go above the yoke. And I need to hold it in place. There we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, make sure that it's seated properly before you let go so it doesn't jump away on you. There's a cover plate that'll go over it that'll hold it into place eventually, but I got a little more work to do before I get to put that thing on. So I want that to be seated about as well as I possibly can. This is, once again, the quick set mechanism for the date function. There we go. And then this spring kind of wraps around the edge of it. And it's a little bit of an awkward angle. But as you can see, I can move the piece around to kind of accommodate the spring, just like that. A little bit of grease at some of the friction points where the keyless works will be pushing up against each other, just again to make sure that it operates smoothly and for a very long time. Okay. Setting lever spring's the last thing to go into place here. And we have to engage it with the setting lever there before tightening it down all the way just to prevent any breakage. And then finally, we get to put this sort of large cover plate on the other side as well. So this will cover all of our bases as far as those springs go. And I can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief here that they're installed and not going to fly off on us. Just a quick check to make sure that it's engaging properly. And what the heck? This thing just came out again. Well, it looks like it may have a little bit of a bend to it. This could be residual damage, the same thing that bent up the case. Let's just see if I can make it work anyway, though. I cannot make it work anyway, though. It just broke. Okay, well, it's obvious that this stem was not in good shape. I believe that the tip of it was bent, and also it may have been weakened when that happened. So I've got a new stem for this movement, and we're just going to replace it and see if we can get that thing to work better. Let's see. This one looks straight at least. And I'll just push down the setting lever release here to let it engage. There we go. Okay, so now we are back in business with our new stem. That does happen sometimes, and it looks like this thing got knocked around really, really bad, and that I think was one of the casualties of it. Okay, now we do need to put on these little gears here, if you will, on top of this barrel bridge, and it's a little bit of a convoluted system that they've come up with here, but normally you'll see a crown wheel and a ratchet wheel, and this one has a ratchet wheel. That's the big silver wheel that I haven't put on yet, but this thing has 3 crown wheels. These basically transfer the winding action from the crown over to actually wind up the spring. Now, you don't normally do that. Some automatic watches don't even have the functionality at all to manually wind, though most of them do. It's just you don't use it, right? Because the whole point of an automatic is if you wear it every day, it never runs out. Most watches these days and of this era had something around a 36 to 48 hour total power reserve. So if it was wound up fully and you put it on your bedside table, it would last for roughly, a day and a half to 2 days. The idea being, of course, that, you might have a watch that you wear to the office, and then on the weekend you can take it off and wear your other watch for the weekend, and then it'll still be running when you get back on Monday morning to go. Okay, so now we can put that ratchet wheel on that I mentioned before. And it looks like it's working properly. And yes, I can get a wind in it as well. And that means that we can really start getting to the good stuff here. This is a pallet fork. And the pallet fork bridge. This is a lovely movement. It is weird. They've got a bunch of quirky ways to do things. It feels a little overly complicated compared to other Omega movements that I've worked on, and even ones that predate this. But it isn't bad to work on. It just kind of has a lot of extra steps. And it's pretty. I like the way it looks. Okay, put a little wind in, and yeah. We want to see that fork jump over. There we go. So that's looking good. And that means that we can put the balance on and make sure that this thing's running again. I expect it to. It better run. Oh, it's running. Boy, it wants to run. That thing kicked right up. You love to see that. That is, anytime a watch starts again in this hobby, it's a reason to celebrate. But, when it was running before, you really want to see it start up again. Because if it doesn't, it means you screwed something up. So that means it is time to oil the jewels now. But do you see what I see here? That's dirt. That's built up. Yes, around the jewel hole there, on the jewel itself, there's some debris. Oh, it's on all of them. It looks like the oil didn't get fully dissolved in my watch cleaning machine. So we're going to have to do some manual cleaning to sort that out. What we're going to do is called pegging out the jewel holes here. And you use a piece of pegwood sharpened down to a point, and this will allow you to manually clean them. Then what I'm going to do is put it in a solution, and I'm going to put that in the ultrasonic cleaner to give it a proper cleaning. So now that it's out of the ultrasonic, we can dry it off any of the solution that was on it, and then take a look at it on the microscope and see, aha, that's what it's supposed to look like. And that's why it stood out so much. I didn't notice it after cleaning, but on assembly I did. And this is what these jewels are supposed to look like. And so now we can go ahead and oil the jewels for the watch as well. As you can see, a vast improvement from where we were with that dirt. And, you might wonder, well, does it really matter with the dried up oil on there? And the answer is, yeah, it does. The watch would run. It's not that it wouldn't run. It's just you're robbing a little bit of performance and a little bit of longevity because that dried on oil will displace the fresh oil that is supposed to be there, So it's not going to run as well. So now we need to take out the balance jewel assembly, which is made up of 2 parts. And it's very tricky. I use this piece of Rodico, that's that kind of blue silly putty stuff, to remove the jewel setting, which is made up of a cap jewel and a hole jewel. So this one here is going to go in first, and then we'll put the cap jewel in as well. What are we doing with this? Same thing as with that train wheel bridge. We're just getting any dried on oil off of there. We want a perfectly clean surface because this part of the watch sees a lot of action. A lot of friction goes through here because this is where the balance wheel is met and how it's lubricated. And the way this works is the axle, if you will, it's called the pivot, will go through the hole here on this part, and then it'll meet the oil that is now being suspended above it in that cap jewel. So it really does provide a perfect amount of oil, and it's suspended right where that pivot is supposed to be. But the pivot does need to align just like that. There we go. And you can see there's a droplet of oil that's suspended right in the middle there. And the watch even kicks back up again. And now I can put the shock setting back into place. This is a very, very small brass spring that allows the movement to take a bit of a shock, meaning not electrical shock, but we're talking like if you dropped it. Okay, this is the seconds hand pinion. So this is going to run and determine and be able to turn the seconds hand on the other side. It is held in place by a small, extremely small friction spring, which we need to tighten down. And now I can put on the automatic winding works again. This is the plate that kind of houses or holds the automatic works on top of it. So this part doesn't do that much, but of course the automatic works will have to reassemble and clean up those as well. And that goes on top of that. All right, this movement's coming back together quite nicely, I have to say. Yeah, we did have to replace a part already, but beyond that, not too bad. Now we can put the rotor back in place for the automatic winding works that I mentioned before. Yep. We can do this later as well. Some people will actually wait till the movement's in the case, but based on what I saw with this case and how weird it is, I wanted to have as much of it together as possible. So let's put it on the time grapher and see how it's doing. Good strong amplitude, 235, minimal beat error, and -1 second today. I'll take that all day. We're going to call that movement good and move on to the case and the bracelet. Now, this is always a big decision point when it comes to a restoration. Do we restore the case? You can see it's bent and it's pretty dinged up here on the bracelet end. I talked to the owner of the watch and we had an idea that I thought was pretty cool. I told him, look, normally I don't restore this stuff, right? It has this kind of history written on it and that whole deal. And he said, you know what? I think we should do a light, tasteful restoration on it because it'll be kind of a new beginning for the watch. And when he gives it to his mom, he thinks that she would really appreciate that, just in light of, that it belonged to her brother, and a new start with that, even though it was a long time since he passed away, I think would be appreciated. So that's what we're going to do here. And I thought that was a really cool idea that he had, but it's up to me to do this tastefully, right? I do not want to make this thing super shiny and garish. I want to bring it back to its former glory. So first thing first, though, we got to repair this bracelet. Now we have to do this either way because this is bent. Like we cannot, it won't work. You know, as you saw, it actually broke the spring bar. So I'm going to use my vise to try to bend it back, but it didn't quite straighten it. And as you can see, I've got two different types of pliers here. These are kind of specialty pliers, and I'm going to use this rounded tip one to try to bend that back. Let's see if it'll sit flat now. Oh, that's a lot better. Okay. That actually worked really well. And here's the other side as well. And that one's done too. So we've bent those back. Now, if you look really carefully here, you can see that this watch band, or excuse me, watch bracelet used to have, in fact, this is a little trick I like to use. Look at the links underneath the clasp and you can see what the original brushing was on it. And this one had a satin brush or a light brush finish going along the direction of the bracelet itself. It didn't have any polished. So that's good to know. I want to bring this back to the way that it was before. So first I need to take apart the bracelet into its three parts. There's two bracelet sections as well as the clasp here. And what this means is that we're going to have to do a bunch of sanding basically. Now you can use a machine to do this. It's much, much faster. I do have one with like on my Dremel tool, but I don't have like a proper polishing wheel. So a lot of times what I like to do is use these sanding sticks and do it by hand. I feel that it allows me to dial it into the level that I want. The machines can be a little overzealous. And as you may know, you can't go back, right? If you over polish something, it's done. And I like to know, you know, because there will still be some scratches that I actually don't mind leaving on here, the deeper ones, because I don't want to take away that much material. But as you can see, this thing already is starting to look a lot better, even after just the initial sanding. And that's without having put the grain back on as well. So that's nice. Now we can do the buckle. And I can actually use this to show you what it'll look like when it's polished in this initial stage and when it's not. So I'm just going to polish half of this thing up, and I'm going to go through the different grades of polishing, or excuse me, a sanding stick here, and take a look. As you can see, much, much better. It even has a little bit of the graining still in there, and probably because of the way that I sanded it. But I'll still apply new grain to it in just a little bit. This is the main part of the case, and as you can see, this outer ring here is polished, but if you look closely, you have to look very closely, it's a little hard to see, but here, do you see the graining? There's actually straight graining on that part. So it is not full polish shiny on that one surface. So first I'm going to polish the outer edge to a polish because that will actually be that way, and as you can see, it's polished now and it's shiny, but this top edge isn't, and it isn't going to be. So what I need to do is I'm going to use this tape, and this tape will allow me to protect certain parts of the polished surface so that I can resurface the grained area that I want. And this is part of the fun, right? I have to go through and just cut off a bunch of pieces of tape and eventually, finally kind of get it where I'm happy that the underlying surface won't. Now I can use some Scotch-Brite here to apply the graining, again, only to that one part. And I want to align it with the original direction of the grain and then give it a good firm pull through the Scotch-Brite and you'll see what happens. You see the graining back on there again? Looking good. I can take off the tape now. And as you see, it's got a polished outer ring and a grained top section. So that came out really nice. And I got an idea though. So for the case back, we're going to leave it. Scratches and all, that was the part for John. That had his initials on it, and that was with him the whole way. So we're going to leave that, and we're going to have just the case back be in its unaltered condition. I think that's a kind of a cool tribute to the original owner. So again, another polish here. It looks quick when I show it to you this way, but you know, that probably took me about 45 minutes to go through all of the different sanding stick levels. And now I can once again reapply the straight graining that was on this outer case as well. It's quite a process to do this, but take a look at the result. You can see that straight graining comes out very, very nice. So that's all finished up. The case is ready. And now we need to continue with the reassembly of the movement. So the part that we haven't put back together fully here is the automatic winding works. Now, there's a specialty lubricant / cleaner called Lubetta here that I'm using, and that's for the reversing gears. Those don't actually come apart, so it can be difficult to get it cleaned and lubricated inside the gear. And so what I use is this Lubetta, and what this does is it has like a combination of like a solvent cleaner, but it doesn't fully evaporate. It'll leave behind kind of a lubricant film behind. So you use an air blower to dry it off, but then it'll mean that that reversing wheel can go back and forth. All right. Each of these little parts serves its role. And then there's a bridge that sort of ties the room together. And just make sure, there we go, that everything's lined up, and then it'll snap into place. It's held on by a couple of screws, so I can replace those, and then we'll have our automatic winding works reassembled as well. And that's going to bring us pretty close, by the way. Because as it stands, you know, movement's almost back together, restored the case and the bracelet. What could go wrong? Take a look at the dial side again. This is where the calendar works will live, as well as the motion works that I mentioned before that control the hands. One thing that I was not able to do, and I actually looked this up and found this trick online, is take off the cannon pinion from the center wheel. And what it says is you can use the Presto tool and use this plate as a flattener to remove it, because you just risk bending it. And look, it worked perfectly. And what this will allow me to do is thoroughly clean the inside of the cannon pinion as well as the outside of that wheel. And once again, I'm just going to use a solvent here to do that. And then I can lubricate and reassemble those parts. You know, you learn something new with this all the time. You know, this isn't the normal way. There's normally a tool that I have that will take that apart, but it wouldn't in this case because of the design. It's just different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a basket and then run it through the ultrasonic cleaner once again, just to make sure that there's no debris or any dry lubrication inside. And with that done, I can now reassemble it with a little bit of HP 1300. What does that mean? That's the code name for the oil that I use here. It's a medium viscosity. As you can see, I can just click this back into place, and now we've got that done as well. And we can reinstall it in the watch and continue the reassembly here of the calendar side, or dial side, or hand side, or whatever you want to call it. Here's another plastic part. That part's actually what pushes the calendar ring, the date ring, the one with the numbers printed on it, over. All right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that seems to be correct. This is called the hour wheel. That's actually what the hour hand attaches to once it gets engaged. And here's that calendar ring that I mentioned a minute ago. And this is a calendar ring jumper. This provides tension on the inner teeth of that calendar so that it can kind of click over rather than just slowly rolling around. It does need a spring here, though, to apply pressure to that outside edge. It's a very thin spring as well. It's a little bit precarious the way that it sits in here. These always make me very nervous. Okay, yes, and I want to get this cover plate on about as quick as possible, because those ones just don't feel very steady. They're so thin. Okay. Well, that's good. Three screws hold on, three pretty small screws hold on this cover plate. And now we can give it a quick test. And yeah, that looks like it's working well. So with that in place, we can now put the dial on. And make sure that it gets secured via the screws on the side once again. And now we can test the date to make sure that it wants to turn over as it would normally, not quick set style, but just via the operation of the hands. And it doesn't look like it actually wants to. It feels as though it's stuck. So let's take a quick look and see what might be causing this issue. This is the part that's supposed to turn it over. And if you look, there's a little knob there at the bottom and it's gone. I mean, it is worn off. I mean, it's plastic. I really don't understand the plastic thing. So I ordered up another one and let's just take a quick look at it. And yeah, do you see nothing there? And then on the new one, there's a nice little bump protruding there. And that's what's supposed to be there. That's what engages with that slot and gets dragged around and then ultimately turns the calendar over. So we're going to install the new old plastic part and let's see if that'll work to actually make this calendar work, because it was not working, non-functional. I don't know if it's regular wear and tear that would cause that to happen, or maybe the shock that the watch took. But there we go. Now it's working just fine. Thank you very much. So that's good to go. And now we can continue with our reassembly. Only a few more things to do, although first we're going to put on the hands. And then I'm a little worried about this case. If you remember to when we took it apart, just how wild it was. So different from any other case I've ever seen or worked on or heard of. And I can't say it's a very fun one. So I'm a little nervous about that part, but let's get the hands in place. And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. There's the minute hand going on. And then the seconds hand is the last one. Gentle. Okay. And we'll just give it a little tiny bump just to make sure that it's engaged. And then the hacking mechanism is on, so I have to push the crown in, but there we go. It kicks right to life. And you can see that seconds hand is working just fine. So that's good to go. Now, let's tackle this case situation. Look at this. Normal watch would have like a case and a case back. Maybe a crystal that needed to be replaced. This thing is absurd. Just on the bench here, we've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's like 7 or 8 parts. There's the crystal, by the way. I was able to find a brand new Omega crystal for this, so that's really nice because that crystal was pretty scratched up. But I can't even remember how this thing goes together. The movement sits within this main part of the case. Take a look at the crystals here. You can see one of them's pretty scratched up, so we'll use the brand new one here. And it's like a 3-piece section here with like a support plus this new crystal plus the gasket. And I'm just going to kind of sandwich it into place because I think that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, if you remember, I had to dig out that gasket. Well, I've got a new one here. And we'll make sure that it's seated correctly. This is what it was supposed to look like, not that pile of grime that we had from before, because it had just basically disintegrated. There we go. Now I can put this outer case on. Like that. So that looks pretty good. And now there's this other rubber gasket or plastic gasket thing that goes on the case back itself. And then that allows it to kind of squish into place strangely, like that. And it kind of just gets friction fit in with a little bit of elbow grease there. What a weird case construction on this thing, but it's starting to come together at least. We got that going for us. Now, taking a quick look at this bezel, we've got a real issue here. So first, I'm going to put this bezel spring in at this, a little bit of silicone grease as well. This is what allows it to spin, but have a little bit of friction on it as well. So that part I'm not worried about. Spring looks fine. But there is no bezel insert for this watch, and the owner went to great lengths to try to source one, and they're just impossible to find, and if you do, they're very expensive. So we've got a little bit of an issue with that because I'm unable to find one either. So we're going to have to deal with that. He did have an alternate bezel that he found, and we may just go with that until he can find the real one. We'll look at that in a minute. In the meantime, I do need to put this crown in, and it looks like the stem is a little bit too long. So I'm going to remove the stem and then use a file here to trim it down to size. You can use end cutters if you need to trim off a whole bunch, but for something like this where I just need a little bit, that's going to have to, I can just use the file to get it down. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Loctite here. This is the purple Loctite. It's the least adhesive one, but it'll help just when you have to set the watch to make sure that the crown doesn't come out. But it's not permanent. Like you can still take the crown out if you have the right tool later on. And then we'll just give this a quick test fit. That looks good. It does actually screw into the case a little bit, so we've got a little wiggle room there. So here's the bezel going on, and I think it just, yeah, there we go. It just snaps into place. But again, we don't have the outer part. So let's put the bracelet on. I've got new spring bars here. We're not going to try to reuse the old ones for obvious reasons. And take a look at how this thing came out with the new with the bracelet having been refurbished. It's already looking really good. And this is the bezel that he sent me that he had found. It says that it'll fit, and let's find out. Well, actually, it does fit. That's actually not the worst I've seen. I would view this bezel as probably a middle ground type thing, like until he can find a new one. But they're very, very difficult to find, as I said, and they're very expensive if you do. So I'm going to leave that up to the owner, whether he wants to keep that one or try to find the other. But take a look at that. We have fully restored this Omega Cosmic 2000 in remembrance of his uncle John, who he never even got to meet, but this is going to go to his sister, to John's sister, and hopefully it'll give her good memories of her brother, even though he passed away quite a long time ago. These are the type of watches that it's all about. You know, these are the real ones. These are the things that help people stay connected to loved ones and prove that it is really a lot more than just something that tells time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this journey. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you want to catch up with me on Instagram, I'm wristwatch_revival over there. You can stop by and say hi. I'll post pictures of in-between project updates and whenever I post a video, so you never miss one. I hope to see you over there, and we'll see you next time.